Hey everyone, welcome to Fast Intelligent Care. This is our part 2 with Jemma Cooke. We're going to talk about manual handling or moving and handling of people. So we're looking at things like your standing hoist, floor hoist, manual transfer aids like your sit-to-stand transfer aids and slings. So Jemma, are there any client features that you kind of look at, or not client features, but client factors that you kind of focus on when you're looking at things like your standing hoists or floor passive hoists? What are some of the client factors that you really want to know about the person?
Yeah, so when clients are sort of coming to me or other therapists are coming to me and they're wanting to look at, the most suitable transfer aid hoist for their clients, one of the first things that we'll look at, for trying to determine whether, a standing hoist is going to be suitable or whether they're needing a full hoist, looking at, is this person able to engage at all in a sit to stand transfer? Whether that's, assisted, needing a lot of assistance, or if they can do that on their own. What's their strength like, particularly their lower body strength. If they are able to sort of stand up, are they able to, stay standing? Other things that we might look at is, the client's cognition, and whether there's any impairment there. Because obviously, for someone to being able to use a standing hoist, we really don't want to be using that with clients that aren't able to follow directions or follow instructions, particularly those with cognitive deficits, because it can make it quite unsafe using the hoists. So that's probably looking at sort of their strength, balance, things like that, and then the cognition. I'd say for me is really important. Because it's all about sort of making it as safe as possible for the client and then everyone around them using the equipment.
Yeah, that's really good. And in terms of environment, do you find there's certain environmental barriers that you come across when it comes to hoisting?
Yeah, definitely. So I predominantly work in the community space. So I'm seeing people in their homes. So often, that the home environment isn't really going to accommodate, big hoists and lifters. Most of these aids were designed for use in, hospitals and aged care facilities where there's plenty of space. The staff there have all been trained up on using the pieces of equipment. Often, when I'm going to the homes, that's like one big thing is like looking at where the piece of equipment's going to be used. And most of the time people have, these small little homes, carpet on the floor, which makes it really difficult to sort of maneuver anything. And, they might, have a regular bed. So it's like, okay, now we need to look at getting them an adjustable bed that is going to accommodate the lifter. And then also looking at, people involved. So it might be that the client has got some family that's willing to be trained up on using the lifters. And then obviously if they've got, if they're whether it's an NDIS participant or an aged care, and they've got some sort of funding and that provider can offer, care workers. And then it's, looking at the availability of those people. And things like that.
Yeah. And when it comes to support ratios, I don't know if you've heard of single-handed care.
Yes.
Is that something that you think is possible? Do you think it's something that is possible within the Australian kind of culture, or not culture, but with the supports that we have at the moment, that single-handed care is possible, or even with the equipment that we have access to? And if not, what do you think could help to have something like single-handed care where we have one carer instead of having two when it comes to like floor hoisting, or not floor hoisting, but your passive hoists?
Yeah, so obviously we recommend more than one person is involved in the care, particularly when you're using, full hoists and things like that, because it's a lot for one person and it's just not generally safe for them to be doing that. However, I would say that it definitely is possible, and I have seen it
Yeah.
multiple times. So, generally, clients, it's a family member that's, heavily
Mm.
involved. They're usually the primary carer. And it might just be that, they're the only person in the family that's able to assist.
Yeah.
Um, and then, the client might have some sort of government funding where they've got access to support workers, but then they might not, they might be very new into the program where there's just not that funding set up yet.
Yeah.
So I have seen it. Generally, with things like your manual transfer aids, that's,
Mm.
it can definitely work with single-handed care. When you start moving into more your sort of standing hoists, that's when it gets a little bit more tricky.
Yeah.
Um, in saying that, if the clients are still engaging somewhat in the transfer, and cognition maybe not isn't an issue, they're able to follow instructions from the carer. That's obviously very helpful. It's when you've got someone who is completely like fully dependent, they're not able to engage at all, they're not really able to follow any instructions. That's when single-handed care really, really shouldn't be used.
Yeah.
It's definitely not recommended because it just puts the client and the carer at extreme risk
Mm.
of something going wrong. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good that to know that it is possible with having the right equipment and actually looking at that specific client, what they are capable of. But it's definitely true. Like if there's things like behaviors as well, like that could make it very risky. It is better to just have it as double-handed care. When it comes to
Yeah, absolutely.
slings, something that I think a lot of what I've come across with clinical education, a lot of OTs are pretty confident when it comes to choosing a transfer aid, but it's when it comes to choosing slings where there's a lot more hesitation because there are so many slings, there's so many different suppliers, there's different attachment types, and then there's unfortunately not one measurement for all slings. So there's so many things that we need to consider. What is something that you would kind of give advice to OTs that are saying, "Hey, I'm really nervous about sling selection, sling measurements." What is kind of your go to support those OTs?
Yeah, like you said, there's so many different types of slings out there. And, when you talk about the different attachments as well, and, and then it's like different materials, what fabric gets
Yeah.
used. So it's not only looking at like the different sizes, whether it's, going to support their head or not support their head. Um, I would say that, like, for me, we sort of stick to our core sort of range because, like, there's so many
Hmm.
different options out there.
Yeah.
I think if, as an OT, if you're not really sure, I would sort of reach out to maybe the suppliers and sort of just find
Mm.
out like a little bit more about their slings, the different options that are available, get some support, from them. Even for me, like, I do lots of manual handling, things like that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that I've delved too much into the different types because, yeah, there's just so many different options out
Yeah.
there. Obviously, like if we're looking at like standing slings, you've got, your transport slings, and then you've got the regular slings. So I generally, going between those two, I might be looking at, the person and seeing what their lower limb body strength is like. Are they, able to engage sort of in that transfer? Or is it, maybe they're quite weak and they might have days where they're just not feeling very well, very strong. So then that's when I'll be looking at, look, let's get a transport sling in for them because it's going to provide extra
Mm.
support for their legs. Whereas, if we just look at the regular sort of standing sling, maybe this person might have a day where they're just really, really weak.
Yeah.
And, you've got to use that and it's just not going to be safe.
Mm.
But yeah, other than that, I'd say, it comes down to, sometimes it comes down to the client's sort of preference when you're looking at things like the material, what it's made of, what their skin integrity is like, sensitivity. So yeah, there is so so many different factors. I can't say that there's like do this. But yeah, it's definitely helpful to reach out to the suppliers, you know, and maybe just focus on one sort of a core range rather than, you know, feeling like you need to know like all the different types of slings and having like way too many options, because it can be, you know, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah. And I think what I like from what you said as well is that you're actually looking at the client's presentation or their capacity first before you're looking at things like your measurements.
Yes.
I think a lot of times we want to, almost like with wheelchairs, we want to do our mat assessment and then go look for the wheelchair. But with slings, you kind of have to know what type of sling you're kind of looking at in terms of how much support it needs to give before you're looking at things like your measurements. Because once you measure the standing sling, you can go look at, okay, well, what does this manufacturer say I need to measure for their standing sling?
And it will vary as well. Because are you sort of going, oh, they need this size? Because then it's like, oh, well, where does that sort of get you? Like, you still don't know exactly what sort of sling they're going to need. So definitely looking at the you know, the client sort of, you know, their capabilities. You know, diagnosis. There's plenty of different things to look at first before looking for the size.
Yeah, that's true. And I've actually gotten emails from like, as part of my role being clinical support, gotten emails with photos of clients and slings and saying, hey, the sling's unfortunately, you know, too big for this client, but then it was a hygiene sling, and we were actually, when I kind of digged further, it was very evident that this client didn't have any trunk control. So we had to like scratch the whole like question about size and say, no, let's actually choose a different sling completely. So yeah, it's a very good point actually to make. So thank you for that. We will go on to our profiling and height adjustable beds in our next part. We'll see you guys in the next episode.